Ready? So this is basically the start of what's the morning student protest. They haven't even started marching yet, and as you can see, they're already smashing up the place. Police are just coming up there. Sorry.
Vice News bullshit.
I'm not Vice News, mate. Don't worry about it. Vice News bullshit. I agree with him. More than a Molotov, that was. I don't know the name of it, but it's like a sound grenade. And it like, when we were in Turkey, it went off like really close and pierced my eardrum. It's just never been the same since, you know what I mean? Like it's not like bad, but it's, the hearing's bad in this side, you know? It's just annoying, you know? Like I don't need a hearing aid or anything, but it's just annoying.
It's in Ukrainian, right?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I saw it written and I thought, yeah, that's cool. But I found out that there's like a really shitty political party called Popular Front there. So like no Ukrainians want to wear it, you know what I mean? But it is what it is.
What does Popular Front mean by definition?
That's a good question. Like a lot of people get it confused and they're like, oh, it's the communist thing. It's not. Popular Front is a collective of people. It can be anywhere, like, but it's generally involved with like militancy and like resistance movements, but it can be anything. A popular front of people that don't necessarily all agree, but they come together for the one same purpose. You know what I'm saying? And to me, I was like, that's kind of what I want to do, you know? And the idea with Popular, like the joke is it started off as the Popular Front for the Liberation of Conflict Journalism. It was like a joke between me and a friend, because I just felt that like media, there's a problem specifically with conflict journalism, you know, like kind of my sphere that I'm in. And I just thought, you know what, there's people that think like I do who are not getting listened to properly. We don't necessarily all agree, but we can all come together and be like, yeah, we all want to do this thing. So it fit, you know. I thought, you know what, it works. Popular Front, why not? And it sounds cool, you know. And there is meaning to it as well. It's not like a political statement. We're not activists, we're journalists, but it works, it sticks, you know. So I've been a journalist for like 6 years now. I worked with like loads of mainstream people like Vice. I was there for a long time, Vice News when it was good. Did some work for HBO, like Wired, BBC, did all sorts of stuff. And I just found myself like, I don't know, it sounds corny, but I felt like a bit of an outsider all the time. And at the beginning, I was like, oh, I need to change myself and be this way. And then I come to realize like, nah, like fuck that, I can do, I think like what I'm doing, I'm passionate about my work and I feel like I'm good at it. So why do I have to kind of change? You know what I mean? Like, and I felt like there's a lot of problem with the way a lot of the news and media is, the way it's put out. Like, for example, the BBC can make like the most interesting story boring just in the way they present it, you know? And it's just like, oh, I feel like they're making news for like the people, if you like. I feel like they're just making it for each other. Like if you go to some of these fucking like journalist like clubs, you know, they're just, they're appalling. Like they're all just there for each other. It's the same with journalism awards. The whole thing's a racket. It was tiring me out, yeah. So I was gonna be like, right, I'm gonna quit journalism. I'm sick of it. I had a book deal with Penguin that fell through at the last minute and I was like, oh my God, like everything is just going wrong. I was gonna quit to do carpentry. Like my granddad's a carpenter and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna forget all of this media, go and do carpentry. But then I was like, let me have one more idea. Like I got this idea it was just gonna be a podcast at the start. That started to get big and I always wanted to do documentaries. That's my thing, you know, I make docs. And I was like, all these ideas I'm pitching and like commissioners at the BBC who are completely out of touch saying nobody wants that. I was like, I know for a fact they do. Now it's gone from like just a podcast to like a collective, a platform. You know, I feel like I want it to be like the go-to place for like grassroots conflict journalism. And it's getting there, you know, it's definitely spreading fast. So that's that. And there's a lot of people within like the kind of Twitter communities and like online communities that I speak to who are like really involved in a really niche way with discovering things. Like I know a lad that was documenting all of the tank ambushes in Syria, and like he's an IT technician. I knew a lad that was a gardener by day, you know, he works in the gardens in Sweden, but then at night he's basically knows everything about suicide car bombs, to the point where like he even discovered the factory where the switches, where some of the ISIS guys used, where they were made, you know, it's just so fascinating. And I felt like they don't really, that's the really interesting parts actually. The nuance, the small things are more interesting than like, we're here on the front line, blah, blah, blah. Like, that has its place, but everybody knows about that. So I thought, you know what, let me kind of do this podcast and give all those guys a voice, you know, like these weirdos, and I mean that in a good way, like these kind of weird guys and girls as well, like, and let's do that. So I started doing it, and like very quickly by episode 4, I think, it kind of started to like, not explode, but everyone was like, hey, this is different.
So we're in Exarchia, the anarchist area here in Athens. It's 10 years since a young anarchist was shot dead by police around here. They're all protesting, rioting. There's a barricade up there. We've seen Molotovs, and we've seen, I don't know, it looks like small bombs are being thrown or something, but police are fighting with the anarchists now, trying to get up the road.
I think the reason like Popular Front should exist, and I'm glad it does, is because I want there to be an alternative, you know. So now the kind of conflict journalism is very much ring-fenced into BBC establishment. It's all ring-fenced into this, like, you know, did you go to uni at the right place? Did you know the right people? Is your dad rich? Is your dad famous in the media world? Then you might get ahead. Now I'm from the Midlands, man, and like none of my family are in media, like none of my family are rich, that's for sure. And it was just like, you know, I didn't even I finished school at 16, I got no qualifications, I got no uni, no college, no nothing. And I thought, look, if I can get somewhere, you know, I just worked hard and I got somewhere, taught myself. Like, if I can do it, anyone can do it, you know? Like, I'm an idiot, you know what I mean? Like, in a way, I feel like I'm a bit of an idiot for messing up my school and that. There's a huge, like, monoliths within journalism of like, this guy is this, you can't say that about this, you have to do it this way. Like, you have to respect authority, you have to, like, no, like, the only stance we have is anti-authoritarianism. So like, if someone's doing something somewhere that's totalitarian or authoritarian, like stopping people, we're against that. Other than that, it is what it is.
Police have just fired all over the place. Apparently someone has just been killed here. Yeah.
And where do you get the tanks from?
Почти сотня танков под Углегорском.
Зилаев.
Her türlü mücadelemizi vermek zorundayız.
When I was a kid, I found war boring because the way they teach it in schools, I went to like a shitty school and it would just be like World War II, which, you know, fascinating, but they somehow made it boring. Like the most fascinating conflict probably ever. So I always had this kind of interest in rebels, you know, like rebel groups, like people that are not paid to fight. They just fight for something they believe in, which I found fascinating. And then like as a teenager, I was kind of very much involved, or at least like interested in like hard left politics, not like communism or anything like that, but like, you know, like street politics, like anti-fascism and like kind of, you know, libertarian groups. As I got older and like saw like conflict, I realized like those kind of ideas are actually in war as well a lot. It's not just like soldiers, which are fine. Like I like filming with soldiers as well. Like I have much respect for them, but it wasn't kind of interesting me the same way as like rebel groups and militias were. And it's not even that I support any of them, it's just a fascinating thing to me, you know what I mean? Like, wow, how do a guy goes from being like, I don't know, having a job in a corner shop, and then he's suddenly on the front line because his family had been killed or like his house is getting taken by some group. So that is like the most interesting thing. So I started writing like blog and that. I was kind of talking a bit about everything really, but I was fascinated with the Egyptian revolution at the time. I would have been like 20, maybe younger. I was interested in like that sort of stuff and into like kind of street politics groups, and I found that interesting. Then as I got to Vice, I realized like that wasn't enough. Like I wanted to go further. Where does it turn from protest to like action and violence and war? In the sense of like, how does that happen? How does it progress? And then eventually was drawn to that. I did clashes. I filmed a lot of protests, like violent protests. And then I first went to the Frontline and was just like, this is for me. There's something really enjoyable about it in a really dark way. I know that sounds bad. A lot of journalists pretend they don't. you know, oh, we go to the front line, we don't really like it, but fuck off. Like, you wouldn't go if you didn't enjoy it. There's a part of it you enjoy, there's a part of it I hate, don't get me wrong, but I just found that, like, there's an excitement there. And it wasn't so much the adrenaline and the bang, 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 like, that's fine, but it was that people there are so honest, I felt. Like, there's a maybe not even what they say, but there's an honesty about, like, life or death situations. And there's this, I don't know how to explain it, but there's this thing when you're in the zone of the conflict, not necessarily the front, but when you're in a city that's under siege or whatever, there's just like this electric between all the people, and it's just fascinating to me, like almost on an anthropological level. Like, it's amazing to see how life just, I don't know, becomes more clear. Like, everything's a little bit more clear. So that really interested me. And then it was like, well, that's interesting, but is it worth doing this? And then when I kind of was like, is it worth, you know, risking whatever, risking your life, I guess, when I started realizing, like, okay, people are being killed here. This, you know, I interviewed a young girl once who'd been shot in the neck and the head, and she'd survived, and she was like 13, and she couldn't get to the hospital because the military was stopping them going. Stuff like that, I was like, okay, this is really important now. You know, in my opinion, if someone's getting killed for, like, you know, unfair reasons, then it's worth reporting on.
So right now we're here in Raqqa, the former ISIS capital here in Syria. 2 years ago, 80% of the city was destroyed when the SDF and US forces took it back from ISIS.
Yeah, so recently, I just got back from Syria like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it's been liberated 2 years ago by the Kurds and with help from the Americans, and well, not just the Kurds, like the SDF, like the Arab, Kurdish, Syriac, you know, coalition. So they all killed them and got ISIS out of there, but now it's still in ruins, you know, there's very little reconstruction work, and now ISIS, there's sleeper cells now. So the idea is the front line is gone, they don't hold any ground there, but they're everywhere still, you know, they just kind of cut the beards off and kind of vanish back into the population. The reason I wanted to film with the Asayish is because no one really talks to them, you know, they're like this weird military police force, they have the worst equipment, they're undermanned, and they're doing some of the dirtiest work, really. You know, they're on the ground risking getting blown up every day. And I thought, like, you should film with them, you know, and they said some great stuff, and it was just a very interesting kind of, I don't know, like an interesting part of conflict that people think is over, and it's nowhere near over, you know. So, nowhere near. ISIS will come back, you know, definitely. Like in Syria, they're already reforming, you know. So, but, you know, Trump said, like, oh, ISIS is finished. He said that even before they were finished. You know, it's just mad, yeah.
So the yellow vest protesters have just charged the police here. It's been a kettle for about 20 minutes, and they've just decided, right, we're going. They've ran into everybody here, and the police are getting pushed back.
That was that's one of the most real protests I've ever seen. So there's a confusion where there were leftists fighting, there were anarchists, communists, fascists fighting, all fighting, and like just normal working men who are like apolitical, like all fighting against Macron. And they weren't fighting together. Certainly the fascists and the anti-fascists were fighting in amongst the fight against Macron. Like, it was amazing, but it was a popular movement. People were like fucking sick. Amazing to see the power of like all these people. The police were acting like hooligans, man. Like the police, the way they acted in France is worse than anything I've seen the Hong Kong police do. Like, it's crazy. And like the police brutality was unbelievable, man. So yeah, we documented that. Hand grenades, guy had his hand blown off, and people saying he accidentally picked it up. The guy thought it was a tear gas grenade, which obviously don't pick it up, but it blew his hand off. And people saying, well, don't pick it up then. Like, why is there anything that can blow off your hand being thrown at civilians or protesters in Europe? Like, we fought for this, right? We fought to have freedom and allowed to have protests. Oh, well, don't protest then. Fuck out of here, this is Europe. We're allowed to protest. We don't have autocratic governments. We don't have like infringements on our freedom, allegedly. So we should be allowed to protest. Anyone should be, you know, that they should be allowed to protest. So that was amazing to see like that, seeing how like EU country just go boom. And frankly, like,
I mean, the media didn't ignore it.
But they certainly didn't cover the police brutality enough. Like, our video got a lot of attention because we went there, first of all, filmed with them, but then we documented all the police brutality. Like, there's a video, we have it in our clip of, I think, 6 police officers beating a guy with a baton on his own. He's just on the ground, and a woman got her eyes shot out, 2 people got their eyes shot out. Like, wow, that's in Europe. Like, probably should document that, you know, like, it's pretty important. That's what we'll do. We'll continue doing that, you know, anything that is conflict, and we feel like that fits the remit of we can do good there. Certainly there are conflicts where I'm like, man, the BBC is doing that way better than I could ever do it. I'm not going to bother.
For example?
I don't know, I'm just being nice. But you know what I mean, like, there are certain places where there's already too many reporters there. So if I feel like, well, there's nothing we can do that's different, there's no point. But often I feel like we can do something different. We can do our own spin, and we dig deeper maybe, I don't know, but yeah, man.